I believe Mr. Tyree is next.
Thank you. That was
Mr.
great.
Kotruski. Oh, sorry. Mr. Kotruski. My name is Luke Tyree. I'm a major with the U.S. Army. I work in the nuclear space. Was curious if you know of any countries that might have a more resilient uh, supply and electrical supply system. Anyone who's doing a little better than others, maybe. And then if you might be able to speculate on what might drive um, certain countries to have a more resilient electrical supply system than others. If it's in the policy space, or if it's where kind of like if they live in a more contentious part of the world. But thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I can give you criteria first, and then we can discuss who is more resilient, who is less resilient. So because I started with this stock of auto transformers, this literally means that countries that have production of critical electric equipment on their territory are more resilient than the others. Ukraine historically had quite extensive production volumes of auto transformer equipment. And as I had to learn in the course of my negotiations with different donors and supporters of Ukraine in 2022, I learned that unfortunately, many factories that were producing auto transformers and other types of critical equipment in Europe and United States in the past have moved their production sites to China, India, Turkey, and very partially South Korea, maybe. And when I talked to our colleagues from United States, and I was asking them, like, look, guys, you have much larger electric system than Ukraine, more or less 25 times larger. So you probably have around 4,000 auto transformers in your system. And if every auto transformer has a useful life of 40 years, you need to replace around 1,000 auto transformers a year in your system just to maintain the the depreciation rate at a stable level. So I said, if you could spare, like, we do not need 1,000, maybe 20, 15, or 50. The response that I got was that at that time, United States were procuring auto transformers from South Korea and China mostly. But with China, there was a certain, let me say, difficulties in trade relations. And what was happening at that time is that because you had so many items of equipment in your system, some of the operators tended to cannibalize the existing fleet. So instead of buying, let's say, 1,000 auto transformers a year, many operators were just prolonging useful lives, or if they had one auto transformer out of operation, they would replace it with another used auto transformer from another substation. This is exactly what we did, by the way, in 2022 and 2023 in Ukraine, but we did it because we lost, I mean, almost like 50% of the transformer capacity in the first year of the bombing. But what I'm trying to say is, when you don't have production facilities in your country, you're vulnerable, and you tend to have limited supplies in case you need them badly. The second criteria would be, of course, the level of decentralization of your generation assets. So countries like, let's say, Portugal, they have more resilient system than countries like, I don't know, Slovakia. Why? Because Slovakia has a nuclear power plant that provides major part of their generation output, while Portugal has thousands of wind and solar farms. And if you ask me what objects have to be damaged in Portugal to make their system collapse, I would tell you, well, I don't know. It's like what server you need to switch off to put down internet. There's no answer. Well, the same principle has to be applied to electric system. There should be no object or no cluster of objects that would have catastrophic impact if they are switched off. And unfortunately, most of the electric systems in the world, especially the big ones, do not correspond with such criteria, including some of the big states in the United States, because you probably may be aware that United States historically have limited connectivity between each other. For example, Texas is not very well connected with other parts of the grid, and some other big electric systems within the United States are also not very well connected to others. So that means that these big systems, that they rely on a limited number of big plants, which can be attacked not necessarily by missiles, but also by cyber attacks. Last but not least, those systems which have well-planned restoration protocols and well-designed air defense systems, like in Israel, they of course tend to be much more resilient than electric systems which were not prepared for the war. And unfortunately, most of the countries are not prepared now, including NATO member countries.